As Ken Corla, the bill before the House seeks to reduce the interest rate on the portion of Greece's debt and to lengthen the repayment terms. Specifically, it looks to reduce the interest rate to 0.5%, and it looks to lengthen the repayment schedule by up to 15 years. As Ken Corla, I support this bill in the hope that it will go some way to helping the Greek state and the Greek people tackle the painful social and economic crises which they're dealing with at the moment. Now, these changes are the latest in a set of financial supports which have been offered to Greece from Europe and the IMF. These include a €110 billion loan in 2010, a €130 billion loan last year, and a further €30 billion loan last year to help them with their budget deficit from 2015 to 2017. We've also seen, Last Ceann Comhairle, several reductions in the borrowing rate for Greece, one of which we benefited from and was claimed by the government as its greatest success in lowering our debt burden so far. Now, in exchange for this, Greece has agreed to three things. It's agreed to an austerity-only approach to correcting its budget deficit, and we know what happens there. It's agreed to the large-scale selling off of its public assets, and we're all too well aware here of some of the pain incurred there, for example, having to sell off the national forests. And it's agreed to comprehensive structural reforms which, while welcome, are complex and take time. Critically, Last Ceann Comhairle, private investors have played their part. Unlike in the Irish case, private investors agreed to a 54% reduction in the face value of the Greek public debt that they held. And it was the Greek people and not speculators who benefited from this. So how's it going so far? Well, as we know, the Greek people are struggling to achieve all of these changes and to do them all at the same time, as any country in the world would struggle to do. We've seen reports of hospitals running out of important drugs. We know that employment was recorded at 25% last year, and youth unemployment is now at 50%. 50% of their youth have no job. So they're being set up for decades of intergenerational poverty and social problems. And we know that many people's pensions, both publicly and privately, have been wiped out. So we know that the people of Greece are dealing with a level of pain that thankfully we have not en masse had to deal with yet. Now, I think there is hope for Greece in the medium to long term. I think there are significant structural reforms that can come about. And I think if they can achieve these, it will drive economic growth. It will drive standards of living and employment. And in light of this, I can understand why the Troika might have set an ambitious reform plan for Greece. However, Last Ceann Comhairle, I believe that the Troika and Europe are now making the same mistake in dealing with Greece that the IMF have made in the same situation for decades. And it's this. They go into a country in huge trouble, be suffering from all sorts of social and economic crises, and they demand that this country upgrade its capacity, upgrade its economy, upgrade its national institutions to international best practice in a few years. Now, as we in Ireland know, it takes years, it takes decades to achieve these things. We in Ireland have been at it for decades, and we've still got a long way to go. And yet countries like Greece are asked to make these changes and to become Germany in the space of about 5 years. One of the reasons it doesn't work is because it just can't be done. So what's going to happen now over the next few years? Well, we've seen a new government elected, and we've seen a raft of reforms which are going to be incredibly painful for the Greek people. We know that they were only politically possible when the Troika threatened to turn off the tap, essentially closing down the schools, closing down the hospitals. Now, regardless of their efforts and regardless of their successes, Last Ceann Comhairle, Greece is probably going to need significant additional support over and above this bill in the coming years. This year, Greece's national debt is going to hit 190% of GDP. 190%. Now, without the haircut taken by the private investors, it would be 220%. Now, we've talked a lot about debt sustainability in the Oireachtas over the last few years, and debt becomes unsustainable somewhere between 80% and 120%, depending on the country's tolerance for it. Ireland could probably deal with a higher debt level than Greece. Now, we're at 120%, which is unsustainable. Greece is at 190%. So I can see no case in which Greece is not going to need a massive write-down of its debt The problem is this. Here's how the Eurozone will deal with it. They'll give them a little bit next year and a little bit the following year, and so on and so forth. Sounds familiar? So their debt level will still be unsustainable. But they'll just about keep the lights on. They'll just about keep the schools open. But they're looking at decades of stagnation. So what can we in Ireland do? What can the government do? What can we, the Oireachtas of the Republic of Ireland, do? Well, immediately we can vote this bill through, which I imagine we will do. And in the coming months, Lascian Corla, we can promote an understanding across Europe that no country can be expected to reinvent itself in a small number of years, particularly when it's dealing with multiple crises at the same time, and particularly when the model it's being asked to become is somebody else's idea of what a modern society and a modern economy should be. We can also argue that Greece's debt is unsustainable and that it needs a write-down, not in pieces, not sort of 5% here and 5% there so that it stays on the never-never for the next few decades, but that it actually needs one or two serious write-downs. Yes, they need to come in tandem with some structural reforms, but we need to be smart and compassionate and understanding about what is asked of Greece in return for a very substantial further write-down in its debt to make it sustainable. And while we're at it, Lascian Corla, we should be looking for the same for Ireland. Rather than stating that we will repay all monies owed, we should be insisting on a significant write-down in the total burden of debt this country has taken on in order to prop up the Eurozone financial system. Rather than accepting a few more years to pay back money at 3.5%, we should be making the same case as that for Greece. We are about to vote through a package for Greece at 0.5%. And at the same time, we're meant to be happy about being allowed borrow at 7 times that rate for another few years. That's what we're doing this week. Now, if we could get it down, Lascian Corla, to 0.5%, or indeed to Deputy Matthews 0% ideally, that would constitute real burden sharing. It's very important that we don't accept the scraps from the table of Europe. Now, I listened with interest to Deputy Mitchell's criticisms of my reaction to Minister Noonan's announcement this week that we could still borrow for a few more years at 3.5%. Apparently, I was being churlish. And that old chestnut, I was talking down the economy. Or how quickly the new guard takes on the rhetoric of the old. So rather, Lascian Corla, than swallowing the government's Prozac, as Deputy Mitchell would appear to have done, let's just look at the facts attached to this deal we're meant to be so happy about. First of all, there will be absolutely no cash benefit for at least 3 years. Second, on very conservative assumptions, it will be worth somewhere between 50 million and 100 million a year on average to Ireland for the next decade. So a fraction of the increase in public sector increments this year alone. That's what it's worth. Not to be sneezed at, but certainly nothing to be getting excited about. Now, it allows us to continue to borrow at 3.5% when Greece is going to get a deal for 0.5%. And let's not forget, Lascian Corla, the ECB is lending long-term money to European banks at 0.75%. So let's just be clear. We are meant to be happy with a deal that charges us for money at 7 times what Greece gets and over 4.5 times what banks in Europe get. Now, the other thing that Minister Noonan announced, which wasn't picked up and didn't make the headlines, is that we would still bear the risk for the ESM recapitalising our banks. This is pretty significant stuff. In fact, this blows last July's announcement completely out of the water. And it is a victory for Merkel and Germany. Because what did the German finance minister do? The morning after that July announcement at 4 a.m., he stood up and he said, nonsense. Every sovereign will still be on the hook for the risk of its banks. In other words, there's not going to be any burden sharing here.
Thank you, David.
Minister Noonan conceded that on the same day that we were told to be happy about the 3.5%. So I don't like coming in here and calling the government out. I would deeply love the government to be coming in here with good news. But in opposition, it is part of my role to call them out. And in my opinion, the facts say that yesterday's announcement was a victory for spin over substance. If we are to recover, we must get a substantial write-down in the total debt burden. I support this bill because it goes some way to doing that to Greece. And it is high time that this government achieve the same for Ireland. Thank you.